Hey class. So this week we're doing something a little different. As you could see, I'm behind the camera for once instead of lecturing with a PowerPoint slide. So it'll be more exciting, I think. And this week we have a guest lecture and also my friend. His name is Bo Goddard, and he has tons of experience with geospatial data science and geomatics, which we'll learn more about. But I thought because this week we're learning about drones and LiDAR and that kind of topic, that he would be perfect to come in and kind of talk about his experience and his skills and knowledge. And hopefully you guys learn something. So I'll just be asking Bo some questions. Okay, so first question. Bo, what's your background and how did you get into geospatial data work?
Okay. My background is for the last decade, I have worked as the geospatial, basically senior geomatics specialist for an engineering firm. That's a nationwide engineering firm, has offices out here in California. Um, and then after I left them, I started my own firm doing the same thing. But I got my start with the military, actually. I was in the Marine Corps and they sent me to a school where I learned to fly drones. It was an RQ-11 Bravo system, uh,
Wow, that's awesome.
commonly known as the Raven. Uh, so it's a backpackable drone system. I went to that school, got really good at it, and then I ended up flying 400 to 500 missions with that through deployments, and I was good at it, and it was interesting to me.
Yeah.
So that opened up a lot of doors. And then after I got out, I went to school. I went to school for geomatics, and I guess we should clarify what that is.
Yeah, that would be
So
great.
geomatics is basically the culmination of bringing a lot of geospatial and geographic skills together. So you're bringing geography, cartography, remote sensing, GIS, GPS, global positioning systems. You're bringing all of that together under one umbrella. And that would be what the study of geomatics is.
Okay. Cool. Thank you for that and defining geomatics. That's something I actually didn't know. And so I know a lot of the projects you've worked on are classified, but can you share any projects like conceptually that you've really enjoyed?
Yeah. I think that this is something, it's such a large umbrella, and you can really do anything and work in any industry that you want because the way the
Mhm.
technology is progressing, it's invaded into everything else. I mean, everybody
Yeah.
has a smartphone in their pocket right now that utilizes
Yeah.
Apple Maps or Google Maps or something, and that actually falls underneath this umbrella.
Oh, cool.
Even the 3D modeling that Google has and Apple has on their maps now falls under this umbrella too.
Yeah.
Uh, so I digress a bit, but project wise, I've worked from the Aleutian Islands out in Australia down to the
Wow.
Florida Keys and everywhere in between. We've mapped mountaintops. We've mapped underwater. We've used our sonar to
Okay.
do underwater based mapping. Um, we have used magnetometers. We've used hyperspectral and multispectral cameras in order
Okay.
to find invasive species and vegetation and stuff like that.
Wow.
Um, we've done population counts on animals using photogrammetrical process.
Wow.
Um, and these are all things that clients will pay a lot of money for because it's some kind of metric that they're required to keep with what they're doing.
Right.
And a lot of that is out in the reclamation side. But uh,
And would you say, sorry to interrupt, would you say that for those like mapping mountaintops, you mostly use drone or like is it all sorts of different sensors and
both. In our experience with the mountaintop stuff, we've actually done more drone work
okay.
because it's more controllable and it's a smaller area. And
Mm-hmm.
generally, when you have a smaller craft like that, you can get higher detail across a smaller area easier.
Right. Okay.
Um, Other cool projects, I've worked in the base of the Grand Canyon.
Wow.
I lived in the base of the Grand Canyon for a couple of weeks and I was doing floodplain mapping. And that was, there's a rainy season up from where we were, and then you just get insane flash flooding that just roars through the base of the canyon. And there was some inhabitants there that were having issues with the flooding, so we actually went in and mapped it all, and then told them, in a flooding event of this caliber, this is a safe area. If you go to the next level and there's even more water, a bigger rain event, well, then you have to have your buildings here. So
Wow.
uh, yeah, and then up in Alaska, we were doing UXO removal. So UXO removal is unexploded ordnance.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
it's a little known fact, but there was um, a little bit of show of force up there in World War II. So there's a lot of
Oh, wow.
artillery and naval ordnance that is unexploded, and it's just not safe. You
Yeah.
can't go to that area. You can't walk around because there is a risk that you might set something off. So there's a big undertaking now to get that removed and make the island safe again.
Wow.
And we were doing that basically with drones. You couldn't do it with a manned aircraft because the cloud level was too low.
Oh, okay.
So you would have to be, 200, 300 foot off the ground,
Oh,
and
wow.
using LiDAR on a Cessna or
Wow.
something just wasn't an option.
Right. Wow. I mean, that kind of leads into my next question. I was going to ask, is there any projects or experiences from your work that highlight like the importance of spatial sciences? I mean, you kind of just touched on one, but I mean,
Yeah. So we've also done a lot of work with manned aircraft, and then satellites even. One thing that we were, well, this was probably 5 or 6 years ago, but we were using satellites to monitor the wildfires that are so prevalent. Um,
wow.
and one thing that you can do with that is using multispectral cameras, you can see what vegetation has been impacted, not visibly by the burn, but even by the heat. And you would be surprised the distance from the fire line that vegetation can be damaged. And you can't see it with the naked eye, but that foliage is going to die eventually. And
Hmm.
so that a lot of times doesn't get taken into account of how much damage has actually been done, and you can see it pretty clearly with multi-spec.
Wow.
Um, so that's a use case I think that everybody would be pretty familiar with out this way.
Yeah.
The floodplain mapping, I think you could see how
Yeah.
beneficial that was, even just for the people that were involved
Definitely.
in that area. But we've done the same thing working with FEMA, helping update their 50-year flood and their 100-year flood maps,
Hmm.
and that was across the American Southeast.
Wow.
So you're saving people's lives, or at least letting them know there could be an issue
Yeah.
in case of a flood or something.
Yeah. Wow. You have such a variety of experience. It's
Exactly.
really neat.
Uh,
Okay, my next question. How do you validate the accuracy and reliability of geospatial models and analyses?
okay. So for validation, we would call it truthing, but how
Okay.
you would truth a model or truth a map on a small scale involves field work. So you'll work
Hmm.
hand in hand with surveyors who will go out, and they have these, it's called an RTK GPS, but it stands for real time kinematic.
Hmm.
And what that basically means is that not only do they have the GPS talking to the satellite, but there's also a radio set up on a known position. So you're getting um, two inputs of information constantly that are being compared against each other, and you get a hyper accurate location
Wow, nice.
there. So you use that GPS to truth your ground points when you're building a model with drones, even with LiDAR on a manned aircraft, and even from satellites. You take these known points that you are absolutely sure that this is where this
Hmm.
exists or exists in X, Y, and Z, and then
Yeah.
you compare the model to that. And that is a part of the workflow, and it's a thing that you have to have. And it's
Okay.
unfortunately something that I see people slipping on a little bit
Yeah.
because the tech is getting better. But you have to you have to build from a good foundation.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess that usually means like some type of manual effort, maybe at the beginning
Yes.
at least. Yeah.
So you'll have somebody go out and they'll basically set like ground control points, or they'll just take
Okay.
a grid pattern shots, and then you can compare your data on the back end to that.
Okay.
Depending on what you're doing and depending on the accuracies needed, depend on how much of that you really require.
Okay.
If you don't need hyper accurate data, then you can use like USGS, the geological
Mm-hmm.
service. They have known points all over the nation, and you
Oh,
can pull from
cool.
those too. It just
Okay,
depends on the
nice.
scale of what you're doing, the scope of
Yeah.
what you're doing, and the accuracy required for your end product.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool, thanks. Okay, I have another question. How have you managed to progress your skills in this field of work? I mean, I know because, technology is so rapidly changing, and it's like, how do you keep up with that?
Sure. Um, it's a fun thing about the field,
Yeah.
but it's also a bit of a job. Um,
Yeah.
the technology is always progressing, and we've reached a
Hmm.
point where it's just exponential. I mean,
Yeah.
quarterly I'm seeing new things come out, and you have to stay on top of it, and that's
Hmm.
just the hardware. When you talk about
Oh,
software
wow.
too, the software that you run and you process your programs on, they're all being updated with new tool sets and everything so frequently.
Yeah.
um, and it's almost a part-time job staying
Yeah.
on top of it. But it is really cool tool sets, and if you're
That's
enjoying
true.
what you're doing, it's kind
Yeah.
of fun to stay on top of it.
Yeah. I mean, not a lot of people like enjoy professional development, but this seems like actually really fun.
Sure. And I recently went to a conference in Denver, one of the largest conferences for geospatial tech, and
Oh,
robotics
cool.
was there. So
What's the
was it
conference
Boston
called?
Dynamics? They were
Oh,
there.
oh,
And
okay.
so they had the robots that you see, the robot dogs
Oh,
and the robot people. So
yeah.
you get to go to stuff like that.
That's really neat.
It's it's interesting.
Yeah. And just out of curiosity, I know, well, for this class, Intro to Remote Sensing, we mostly use ArcGIS Pro, but I know you know that program, but are there other programs and softwares that you use?
Yeah, we've used the Esri stuff. I
Okay.
do like Arc. Um, I actually worked a lot in CAD in my old position, so Autodesk.
Yeah.
And then for the 3D modeling processing side of it, we've used Agasoft's Metashapes. It used to be called PhotoScan, and they rebranded.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the drone to map and the maps made easy and all that stuff.
Okay.
Depending on, they're all just different tools.
Yeah.
So you have to know what is available from them, how much automation they offer,
Hmm.
and what you're trying to get as your end product.
Yeah.
Because sometimes if you don't need hyper accurate, so I'm talking
Right.
like sub centimeter map data, then you can use one of the smaller programs with more automation built in. Um, but if you do need, hyper accurate data, a lot of times, in my experience, it's better to process manually and use some of the programs that allow a more manual process or workflow than have the
Yeah.
automation built in.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great point. It's like knowing the scope of your work. That's kind of what I've been trying to get at with our semester project in this class is like kind of pinning down your objective and like what program and what tools would really be helpful. So that's a good point. Okay, my next question for you. What's your favorite part of being in this line of work? And what's the most challenging part? And maybe you've touched on a few already, but it's okay if you repeat it.
Well, my favorite part of this line of work is, I mean, it's fun.
Yeah, yeah.
I have my commercial pilot's license, and when I first started with the old company, I was actually just doing the flying for them in a manned aircraft. Um, and then we started progressing into drones because the drone tech was becoming just as viable, and it's easier and more efficient depending for smaller scale stuff. Um, and it's fun to be able to get out there and you get to play with really expensive toys and you get to make really cool data sets that can make a big impact.
Yeah.
Um, Even with a drone, like there's a few times with one of the city engineers that I worked with for uh, we helped them map all of the roadways, and then they ended up removing those roadways, and then we mapped all of the easements and the property lines, property owners, and built that all into a map for them, and they were able to pull out the old roads, expand them where they needed to be expanded, and they had everything basically just from the map that we've made them. Um, and it was fun. You know, we used satellite for that, we used drone for that, and we used lidar from a manned aircraft. It was kind of a multi-pointed project.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
And even for creek crossings, we had to use sonar because there was cables that were running underneath bridges and culverts and such. So we had to map the underwater line, and we had to get GPS data across the bottom of the culverts. So that's fun. The other thing that I love about the job is when a client calls and they say, I have a problem and I don't know if there's a tech that exists to fix it. And I think I've talked to you about this before, but we had a government service call us one time and they said, listen, we have abandoned wells and we don't know where they are and we would like to find them. We don't know if is there technology that could help us figure that out? So our company was a bit of a think tank and very, very intelligent people. And we figured out through working with a geophysics firm that we had partnered with before that there was a possibility to find wells using a magnetometer on the bottom of a drone. And so because a well is effectively just a metal pipe going down deep into the earth, 150, 250 feet, it actually affects the Earth's magnetic field slightly. So we were able to fly this magnetometer and get a baseline of the Earth's magnetic field in that area. And then we were able to cover it or grid it out with the drone. Mm-hmm. And we could see the discrepancies of the wells appearing in the data as they got closer to the wells. It was a bigger disturbance. So it was a proof of concept, and we got to kind of not build that tech. It was building it from technology that was available, but as far as I know, it hadn't been done before.
Yeah, like you could
so the problem solving aspect of it is probably my favorite part.
Yeah.
The least favorite part, and again, it's not a whole lot that I don't like about it. I really enjoy what I do. But one thing that I run into that's consistently frustrating is when you have bad data from the field. Mm-hmm. It's very important that you know and you trust and you have really good communication with people that are doing your validation and your truthing. Because if corners are cut in the field, then it can add days or weeks or in some cases months of back end work just trying to fix what shouldn't have been an issue in the first place. And sometimes if you do have bad data, it's easier to just go revalidate and retruth or maybe reacquire your images or reacquire your lidar in the field than it is to try and patch it in the background.
Right. It's kind of like construction, like sometimes easier to start from scratch than like renovate something that someone else did.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, and I actually have always tried to emphasize that point, like you're only as good as your data. So that's really great that you brought that point up. Okay, I think we have one more question I have written up. Yeah. Okay. So what advice would you give someone interested in pursuing a career in geospatial data science or geomatics?
I think that if you're interested in it, it is very fulfilling. If you're interested in it and you have the drive, and it is fulfilling for two reasons. One, it's just cool. I really enjoy getting to play with the new tech and see what's going on and staying on top of it. That's a good time. But also it allows for freedom because the nature of what we do is mostly online or in the cloud at this point. If you're not the one validating or truthing the data, it gives you a lot of freedom to be remote. I would say I'm mostly remote at this point.
Wow.
And then occasionally I do have to hop on a plane and fly and go out and meet a client, or I need to, go do some validation in the field. Um,
That sounds
but
fun
for the
too, though.
most part, I can be wherever I want to be. Here
Yeah.
we're traveling to Europe here for a month, and
Wow.
then we're traveling to Mexico for the month after that, and I will be able to work in both of those places
That's nice.
because of the nature of what we do.
Yeah.
So I would say
Wow.
that's quite a perk in and of itself.
Oh yeah, it's definitely very motivating. Well, I think that was all the questions I had. Thank you so much. Your experience is so vastly wide and really inspiring. So thank you. If my students have any questions, they can direct them towards me, and then maybe I could reach out to you to see if yeah, you have
Yeah,
any answers or more info for them.
yeah. If they have any questions or anything, I mean, they can reach out.
Thanks so much, and I'll see you later.
All right. See you. Thanks.